Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be discussing the Colts wide receiver group. And for a minute now, the Colts wide receiver groups never get enough credit or respect as they should. The Colts they're never really talked about in the media unless it's slander, especially from my favorite guys at PFF. But they did respect us on some things, but overall in general, the Colts really never really gets respected in any type of source of football conversation. Darius Leonard never really gets respected for what he does. Kenny Moore, he never really gets respected for being one of the best at his position at what he does. DeForest Buckner is really good and talented, but he never really gets his flowers. The only person I can think of that really gets his flowers, I don't even think Quentin Nelson really gets the respect he should. And I think the wide receiver group is another part of the Colts team that doesn't get the respect they deserve. T.Y. Hilton last year struggled. It took him a while for him to mesh with Philip Rivers, but even still wound up getting over 700 receiving yards at the end of the year. And this is a guy who led the league in receiving yards before and pretty much is a beast when he is targeted, but never really gets the respect he deserves. Michael Pittman Jr. turned up at the end of his little rookie year. Yet last year he turned up, and they just waved it off. Nobody really talks about it. How the Colts can be a surprising team. You get a few analysts that looks into the AFC South, and I appreciate that, the Dan Orlovskis of the world and that nature, but they never really respect the Colts. They don't really talk about them as they should, and that's kind of, it's hurtful. It's hard being a Colts fan. You root for your team week in and week out in the off season. You acquire acquisitions, and the sky is bright and the future is there, and you don't get any TV time for national broadcast television games for fans that's not in Indianapolis, across the world. It's hard to be a Colts fan. It really is, man. Now, I'm not knocking that other fan bases don't go through this too, but I'm talking to Colts fans. But it's tough. It really is. So going into next year, the Colts wide receiver group doesn't really get talked about. They don't expect anything from the Colts wide receivers. One of the reasons is because Carson Wentz last year slumps in Philly and all this nonsense. Nobody really talks about the Colts going into the next season. And the wide receiver group is pretty talented. Our wide receiver group is pretty talented. We have at least four number 2 wide receivers on the roster. Now, one of the things that went into an article that I read a while ago was that the Colts need a number 1 wide receiver like T.Y. Hilton doesn't exist. Now, of course, T.Y. could be a number 2 elsewhere, but for the Colts, he's a number 1. He needs to be double teamed, because if he's not double teamed, T.Y. Hilton will literally torch any team that single-handedly guards him. T.Y. Hilton is our number 1 wide receiver. He's our X and Z. Him and Michael Pittman Jr. We still got Ashton Doolin. We still got DeMichael Harris. We still got Zachary Pascal. We still got Michael Strachan that we drafted. We have so much talent. Naheem Hines, he'd be lined up with wide receiver. We have so much talent that can literally get us over 500 receiving yards in a year. And that's not bad. And that's separately. Our wide receiver core is so underrated that they can do things that a normal wide receiver core can do. You don't have to have the best guy out there, a number 1 talent, to reach accolades like making the playoffs or going to the Super Bowl. You don't have to have that number 1 wide receiver. Scheme over team. Simple as that. Scheme over team will get you anywhere you want to be. The New York Giants is the greatest example. Now, did they have some wide receivers? Yeah, of course. But nobody knew Mario Manningham, David Tyree. No one knew these guys when they knew Jeremy Shockey, but nobody knew these wide receivers going into the Super Bowl when they played. They did not know these guys. David Tyree, nobody heard of him. But they made a statement going into that year. They were like 7-9. Eli Manning wasn't the best quarterback in the league. He was subpar the whole year. And they got it done. Off of a defense. And that's the perception I have for the Indianapolis Colts team. We will not be the best team in the NFL, no. But if we were able to use our scheme, utilize it as we should, we can go to the Super Bowl. You do not have to have the best roster. You don't. So get that out of your head, Colts fans. So for this wide receiver group, I trust them. I trust this wide receiver group going into next year. Now, when they go there, can they succeed? Yes. Can they fail? Yes. But it's the part of opportunity. You have to dig deep as a Colts fan. Put the slander aside. I know I slander too, but for some reason, going into the next year, a lot of fans they doubt the Colts. I am a doubter, but when the season gets closer, you have to start opening up and start really thinking positively. Start thinking positive. Positive mindset going into next season. You don't want to think about, I didn't even mention Paris Campbell. Paris Campbell's another wide receiver added to that mix. You got Colts plans that wish, Paris Campbell can stay healthy because we know how good he can be. Let's not think that way. Let's think Paris Campbell's going to be there next year and he's going to dominate like he's supposed to. We got to think like that. T.Y. Hilton, he's going to come back to his normal self. We have to think like that. Carson Wentz will lead the Colts in passing. He will do that. He will be a leader. We have to have that mindset going into next season. All the slander or the doubts, we got to throw that out the window. Because the more you doubt, the more it'll happen. I don't know if anybody ever told you that, but let me be the first. The more you doubt as a Colts fan, the higher the risk. So we are going to make the playoffs next year. We got to stay positive minded going into next season, man. But definitely this wide receiver group is underrated. Like I said, we got number 2 wide receivers. Now going into the additions of what we can add. There's nothing wrong with adding depth. I've said that before. There's nothing wrong. Jamison Crowder, he's on the block. He looked like he might be reconstructing his contract, so they might be looking to maybe release or trade him. Adding depth is never an issue. It's never an issue, especially for this Colts team who needs a number 1 wide receiver according to the media. If we add him, I wouldn't be opposed to that decision as well. If we don't get him, it wouldn't matter. Like I said, Jamison Crowder is having some issues at his team on the team he's on right now, so he might be getting waived or traded. But if we would go get him, wouldn't be opposed to that decision. But I love the wide receiver core we have. The future is bright for what we got going on. Let me know your thoughts on the wide receiver core in the comment section. You let me know your whole thoughts. If we would go get somebody else, who would you want that's available, or who could we trade for? Let me know your whole thoughts in the comment section. Until next time, this is Marcus, and you've been Culture Shock.